Roll call, please.
That's me. So Chair, Mr. Glenn Grant.
Present.
Vice Chair, Mr. Michel Payette. Director, Mayor Belinda Clément.
Présente.
Director, Ms. Martha Woods.
Present.
Director, Mr. Bill Beatty.
Present.
Police Chief, Mr. Danny Aikman.
Here.
Deputy Chief, Ms. Shauna Spowert.
Thank you. There's been some amendments to the agenda, just for your information. So number 5 will now be the Boys and Girls Club request. Number 6 will be collective bargaining update. Then the next one will be announcement from the chief. And just to let you know, the September board meeting is going to be on September 9th instead of September 2nd. So could I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Madam Mayor, Michael? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Any declaration of conflict of interest? Seeing none. Could I have adoption of the open meeting minutes of May 6th? Madam Mayor, Bill? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. We'll go right into business. Taxi sale transfer plate number 11.
You'll see in your package a recommendation from Sergeant Robert Archambault in relation to the sale transfer of taxi plate number 11 in the amount of $15,000. We have no issues with this transfer and recommend its approval.
Motion to approve. Bill, Martha? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 2020 year-end financial report, Mr. Paul Scrimshaw, Deputy Treasurer.
Thank you. I believe the board has the financial summary that I prepared for the police services. Overall, I will say it was a crazy year for the department as far as COVID goes. It was a crazy year for city overall. Overall, the department came in at 99.76% of their budget, so they came in with a slight surplus of just under $50,000. Overall, the expenditures, there are quite a few variances. One of note is salaries were quite a bit higher, but that was due to some illnesses that were covered with part-time and overtime. Purchase of goods, there was a surplus in purchase of goods. The main driving factor there was the price of fuel was quite a bit less in 2020 than we had originally budgeted. Services and rents were slightly over budget. Two main primary factors there. One was vehicle maintenance. There was a little bit additional vehicle maintenance and some other professional services that the board is aware of. Financial and transfers pretty much on target, as well as capital. We were pretty much there. So with the expense side, the department did a very good job of maintaining their budget. So when they saw expenditures exceeding in one area, they tried to cut back a little bit in another to compensate in order to come in that way. On the revenue side, item of note is COVID-19 funding. So there's two sources of funding that was provided to the department. One was a federal grant, which was to reimburse us for costs during the quarantine period. And the other was what is called the Safe Restart Fund. So the province had given the city a sum of money to help compensate for COVID expenses and lost revenue. So during our year-end process, we did a review of each city department, and including the police services. And since the police services was quite a bit down on revenue as far as their clearance letters and other community style of revenues, it was deemed that they would receive $150,000 of the COVID funding. Other revenues of note, provincial and federal grants have exceeded budget, and that's due to some grants that were received throughout the year that we were not aware of during budget process. So we have additional funding from the government, which also relates to some of the increases in expenses in salaries and services and rents. They were covered from these grants. And the recoveries that we get from WSIB to cover some of the salary offset. So I know the salaries look quite a bit high, but if we offset it with that one recovery, then we're actually pretty much in line with what the department should be at. So overall, I think the department did well coming in at 97.76% of their budget. I'm willing to entertain any questions.
Any questions from the board? It's a pretty good budget there, Paul.
I try hard.
Yeah. Could I have a motion to accept the financial report? Bill and Madame Mayor, all in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you, Paul. Next is the Employee Census presentation. Deputy Chief.
Good morning. Thank you, everybody. So today I'm presenting to you the 2021 Employee Census. This, as part of our commitment to the work on equity, diversity, and inclusivity, we felt it was very important to get a sense for the diversity that exists within our own workforce. So this report will be used to inform ourselves on the extent of that diversity, and also it will help us understand where we need to do some work in terms of recruiting to reflect the diverse community that we serve. So all employees were given the opportunity to complete this survey, and it took place and was available to them between February 1st and February 28th of 2021. We did make the survey mandatory. However, what we did to compensate for that was to provide an answer of prefer not to say in each category, so that if people were uncomfortable sharing certain information, then they didn't feel absolutely obligated to. Today's report consists of information that we felt was relevant to the board and to the public, and it's prepared in such a way that protects and respects our employees' privacies. So there was a number of different questions we asked. I'll just go through some of those questions and give you some insight on how people answered. So the first question had to do with whether our employees felt that we have an equitable and inclusive work environment. And generally speaking, 84% of our staff agree on some level that it is equitable and inclusive. But I'd also bring to your attention, contrastly, that one could say that 35% only somewhat agree, somewhat disagree, or disagree that the work environment is equitable and inclusive. And, you know, I think that this is important. When we do this work, you know, we don't want to do it in judgment. What we want to do is learn from it. And so this tells us that we have some work to do. In terms of the kinds of employees, the demographic of the employees who completed the survey, the next question deals with the length of employment. And as you can see, of the people who answered, the largest number of employees are either in the 1 to 5 year category or in the 11 to 15 year category. And approximately 70% of those who answered have between 1 and 20 years of experience with the police service. There's also a good range of ages of the employees who completed the survey. And to sum it up, I would say that approximately 71% of the people who answered were between the ages of 25 and 54. Gender is always a question that is asked in the policing context, and the service as a whole, the question that was asked was, what is your gender? And they were given a variety of different possible answers beyond male and female. And we had 90 males, or 90 people say that they were male, identified as male, and 71 identified as female, and 0.6% identified as something other. In terms of the sworn versus civilian complement, on the sworn side, so the police officers, 79.6% are male and 20.4% are female. And as I understand it, the national average is approximately 22% female. And on the civilian side, you can see the opposite. So we have 21.2% civilian male employees and 78.8% who are female. In terms of sexual orientation, we had 110 employees identify as heterosexual and 18 employees identified as something other than heterosexual. Now, we do have a very specific breakdown of the different categories, but again, as a means of ensuring privacy and confidentiality of our employees, we left it vague. The next question surrounds Indigenous ancestry. So this was interesting because perhaps we had more than actually we were aware of. Obviously, there's still lots of work to do in this area as well, but we did identify that there was more who identified as either Indigenous or Aboriginal than what we had expected. As you can see, there are 4 First Nations, 3 Métis, 5 who considered themselves mixed race Aboriginal or Indigenous. And so of the 12 who were Indigenous or Aboriginal ancestry, it represents about 9% of all those who answered. In terms of visible minorities, we have only 1, and that employee identified as being Arab. This is another area, obviously, that we have a tremendous amount of work to do. And I am pleased to report that since this survey was completed, we have started to make some strides in that area. And definitely, we've really re-examined our recruiting strategies, and we find ourselves challenging ourselves every day to do things differently, and that's a great thing. In terms of racial and ethnic identity, I won't go through the numbers necessarily, but as you can see, we have a mix of North American Indigenous, other North American origins, British Isles, French, European, East European, Central Asian and Middle Eastern regions, mixed origins, some don't know. But the majority of folks are either of European or French origin. Languages was another area that we were pleasantly surprised. I mean, we can always do better, obviously. But we have 142, so this was an answer all that apply. We have 142 employees, of those who answered, of course, who speak English. 95 of them speak French. We have 1 person who speaks American Sign Language, 1 who speaks Arabic, 1 Armenian, 1 Croatian, 1 German, 1 Italian, 1 Mohawk, 3 Spanish. So that was a little known fact that came out of this. And so one of the things we've talked about is the need to capitalize on some of these skills and talents that our employees have in a more effective way. And in terms of languages that can be written, English obviously being the predominant, a few less can obviously write French than can speak it. But then we have Arabic, Beaver, German, Serbo-Croatian, Timishmian, and that was the extent of those. And in terms of disabilities, we did have employees who report having disabilities, approximately 9%. And of those 9%, there was a variety of different kinds of disabilities that came forward, mental and psychological, learning disabilities, pain, dexterity, seeing, hearing, mobility, and flexibility were some examples. For religion, as you can see, the majority of our employees appear to be Catholic, although there are a few other religions listed, most of which are some form of Christianity. There are a few New Age spiritual, and then we have 37 employees that don't have any religious affiliation. In terms of the level of education of our employees, of those who answered, 24% have a university degree, 51% have a college degree or CGIP, and 92.2% have some level of post-secondary education. It'll be interesting to see in the coming years whether that starts to shift and that we start to see more university-educated employees, but at this point, this is the makeup. So in terms of our EDI work, this is going to form the baseline. We'll be redoing the survey in the future and compare those results with our baseline to see how we're doing in terms of improving on reflecting the diversity of the community. And we're still working out the details as to when we should resurvey and how that should be done, just so we're not bombarding our employees constantly with personal type questions. So that's the end of the presentation. If anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Any questions? Madam Mayor?
Thank you for that. I'm glad you ended on when we would do this again. That's sort of an ongoing process. How did you determine the different answers? So that was...
So some research was done on other surveying techniques. We looked at Stats Canada and some of the headings that they use. And so it was sort of we drew from a few different areas to make sure we were covering everything or as much as we knew possible.
And that could change too going forward once you do this again?
Absolutely.
How are we supposed to interpret the prefer not to say? Of course, that's always a good category to have. Sometimes it's high. It's interesting that it's 10% in the how long have you been employed category. So I guess maybe people don't feel anonymous if they indicate how long.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's people would be concerned that if you filter it down, you might be able to identify who they are.
Mm-hmm. So are we to interpret that whenever there are certain percentages in the prefer not to say, is that we have to lean into that? In other words, people are not feeling comfortable with this process or are sort of reluctantly participating. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do for sure. I think first off, this is the first one we've ever done.
Sure.
So there's always some, anxiety around the first.
Sure.
And we're really just starting on our equity, diversity, and inclusivity journey. And so perhaps not everybody understands the value or what this information was going to be used for. I purposely started out the presentation by talking about ensuring that our employees' confidentiality and privacy was, the utmost importance, because it needs to be. They're assisting us, informing us on how to better serve the community, but that doesn't necessarily mean that their most personal information needs to be shared. So I'm not too worried about the number of prefer not to say. I think that over time, I think that people will become more and more comfortable with these kinds of things, so long as we continue to respect their privacy.
Right. I think this is good work in terms of the process. And, you know, surveys are tricky. Just from a City of Cornwall perspective, we're doing them more often with community, and it can be awkward. And people always want to know, so what are you going to do with this information? Why are you collecting it? And then what are you going to do? I mean, we all went through the census recently, and even though, you know, it's my how many census in my life, there's still a little bit of awkwardness in terms of answering those personal questions, and always that question, like, what is the government, what is Cornwall Police Service going to be doing with the information? So I'm just putting that out there as a concern.
100% agree.
Any other questions? That was, to me, a very interesting report. It's looking at statistics, but I agree that the next steps are important. So, could I have a motion to receive the report? Bill and Martha? All in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you. The next, we have a request from the Boys and Girls Club. It's requesting support for their golf tournament. So we've been, apparently in the past, we've donated $500 to the Boys and Girls Club for the request is coming again, so I need a motion to approve, if you do approve that. So, Michael and Madame Mayor, all in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you. Now we have a collective bargaining update. Shauna?
So this has actually been moved out of the closed session and into the open session because I come with some really great news, and that is that the collective agreement for 2021 to 2023 has been ratified by the membership of the Cornwall Police Association. And so we are moving into the memorandum of settlement stage, and that will be completed over the next couple of weeks. But it's very positive news, as you know. The feelings from the board's bargaining committee was very positive, and it was a very cooperative experience. And so we're happy to see that the membership ratified that deal. I do have unfortunately the association wanted to join us. But they had an annual general meeting for the Police Association of Ontario today, so they weren't able to come. Did you want to read the media release, or would you like me to?
Oh, you may as well.
Okay. So they've sent this release. The Cornwall Police Association's bargaining unit is pleased to announce the ratification of a new collective agreement with the Cornwall Police Board. The bargaining unit's top priority was the wellness of its members. Through the bargaining process, the Cornwall Police Board recognized the bargaining unit's priority, and both parties were able to accomplish their respective bargaining goals. The Cornwall Police Association bargaining unit is very pleased with the way the bargaining process unfolded. A special thanks to Police Board Chair Glenn Grant, Vice Chair Mike Payette, and Deputy Chief Shauna Spowart.
Thank you, Shauna. And it's really good news. It's a good news day. This was going to be in another section of but this is good news for our city because it shows that we're working together. So I was really happy to hear this, and I'm sure Michael was as well, because we had a great bargaining session. It was probably the easiest session I've ever had with bargaining. So anyway, thank you. And it's so could I have a motion to approve this? Bernadette and Martha. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Can I just say something, Mr. Chair? I want to thank both you and Board Member Payette. It's nice that the Cornwall Police Association highlighted your role here and Deputy Chief Spowart, so thank you for that. I also am taking note of the fact that they talk specifically about the wellness of the members, and since my time on this board, that has been a top priority, certainly for this board, and we are united in that understanding of it as a priority.
Well, I just want to add, I bargain both from a union perspective and a company perspective, and it was the flow of information was very, very easy, and I was impressed with their bargaining unit, and impressed with Shauna and our lawyer. They did 90% of the work. Mike and I nod our head every now and then, but anyway, it was a great bargaining session. I really enjoyed it. Michael, maybe you have a few words?
Just like I said too, I also enjoyed the whole process too. It shows that the association wanted to work with us, wanted to work with the board and get down and get the business going and just to move on. So very happy that everything turned out positive.
Graham?
Bill?
Well done.
Thank you. Danny, Chief, I should say, you have an announcement?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to bring the board up to date on some police work that occurred overnight. And first, let me comment that this past week has been an extremely busy and arduous week on our frontline staff. We've had a couple of fatalities, both motorcycles involved in fatalities. We had another one overnight. But the topic that I specifically want to talk about this morning is in relation to opioid trafficking operations. And I know there's a front page article in the Freeholder this morning in which some residents on Cumberland Street are rightfully expressing their concern about what's going on in their neighborhood. We recognize and acknowledge that problem. We've identified this issue several months ago in regards to the emerging trend of very dangerous fentanyl products in our community, and along with many other communities in the province of Ontario. And we've worked cooperatively with the Eastern Ontario Health Unit in regards to developing some strategies. And one element of those strategies to address the opioid issue is enforcement. And I'm pleased to report this morning the culmination of a 4-month-long investigation in cooperation with the OPP. This morning we executed 11 search warrants at 9 different locations and used the resources of ourselves and the OPP. There was 104 police officers on the ground. We have several arrests made. There will be a more formal media release on this issue next week once the investigation continues. It's a fluid and ongoing investigation as we speak, but I can report that there are many individuals involved in the fentanyl trade in Cornwall who are currently residing at 340 Pitt Street this morning. So it is one element we take very seriously in regards to trying to address this issue. It's an element that we cannot talk about publicly because, quite frankly, the nature of these investigations needs to be kept confidential. And I know residents become frustrated when they call us repeatedly and they don't see any actual action happening. And I can assure the citizens of Cornwall that there is actual action happening. And last night's investigation, the culmination of this investigation, is the fruits of that investigation. So I wanted the board to be aware of that and know that we continue to work on addressing opioid-related issues in our community.
Thank you, Danny. Any questions? Madam Mayor?
Yes, Chief Aikman, can you just repeat how many arrests, how many search warrants, and how many arrests?
We executed 11 different
11?
search warrants at 9 different locations.
Okay.
I don't have a complete list of the number of individuals arrested, but I believe it's in the range of 10 this morning.
Okay.
There is also a quantity of illegal product that has been seized, money and firearms in relation to this investigation. And we're in the process of putting together a more formal press release. I believe it's scheduled for early next week in cooperation with the OPP. But I also want to emphasize this. We thank the OPP for their assistance, but this was a Cornwall police-led investigation for the past 4 months.
And the role of the health unit in this process?
Education.
Okay.
And we've been working with Dr. Paul's staff in trying to develop education and addiction-related issues, mental health issues surrounding addiction, and we'll continue those efforts as well.
The front page article refers most specifically to the Cumberland area, but there are other areas in the city as well that are impacted, right? So that would mean that your search warrants covered other areas in the city as well.
Yes,
Okay.
and at pretty much every sector of the city, a warrant was executed this morning.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Any other questions? I just have one, Chief. Can you advise the residents of Cornwall the best way to assist the police in
Absolutely. We get information all of the time, whether it be through Crime Stoppers or directly to my office or to the Deputy Chief's office or other offices. We take that information and we forward it to our street crime unit. The process in actually conducting an investigation is not like a radar enforcement activity. This is something that requires extensive investigation, often relying upon informants and perhaps undercover elements in order to get enough information to satisfy a judge or a justice of the peace that you have enough information to get a search warrant. And once you've got that search warrant in hand, then you make a more active step towards stopping that activity. But it takes time. It's not something that can be thrown together in a matter of days. It's weeks and months to get an investigation like this together. And I know it's frustrating for citizens who continue to see drug activity in their neighborhoods. I want to assure them that we are doing the best we can to address, and we specifically address, and this is something in the newspaper article this morning which was factually incorrect. We specifically address street-level operations in the city of Cornwall. We work with our partners, the OPP and the RCMP, on larger-scale investigations targeting middlemen and higher-ups in regards, but specifically our street crime unit addresses street-level distribution of narcotics in the city of Cornwall.
Thank you. And would you advise residents not to take matters in their own hands? I know it's a given, but just to reassure that.
I would, and I know frustration sometimes results in people taking matters into their own hands. Beyond the simple dangers of that, they might find themselves as being the subject of an investigation if they do something inappropriate during that altercation. So best to contact us. We have the means to take that information, put it together with other information, and conduct investigations on these matters.
Thank you, Danny. So could I have a motion to receive Danny's announcement? Bill, Michael, all in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you. At this time, we're going to take a short break to get set up for an announcement coming in at 10:15. So I won't ask for an adjournment because we're not adjourning. We're just taking a small break.